Hello, I'm Jill at engVid, and today we're going to look at a poem. I've had a lot of requests for more poems, so here we are. And this one is called In an Artist's Studio, and it's by a woman poet called Christina Rossetti. And these are her dates, 1830 to 1894. And she was based in London. She lived in London. And so you would call her a Victorian poet because she lived in the reign of Queen Victoria in this country. So that's Victorian. And she also was part of a group of people, well, not her specifically, but her two brothers were part of a group of artists called the Pre-Raphaelites, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Brotherhood tells you they were all men, but she was connected through her family. So she is sort of thought of as part of the Pre-Raphaelite movement in a sense. So they were painters mainly, but some of them were also poets. And her brother Dante Gabriel Rossetti was a poet and a painter. So it's interesting that here she's writing about an artist, and you might wonder, is she referring to her own brother? We don't really know for sure, but it's an interesting thought. Well, let's have a look at it as a poem, and just to see what it's all about. Also to look at some of the poetic features, like the rhyming, okay, and the choice of words, things like that. So I've just written up the first 4 lines. It's 14 lines in total, which means that it's a sonnet. You've probably seen me mention this word before. If you've seen some of my other poetry videos, I've looked at some sonnets before. So a sonnet is usually 14 lines long. Okay. Right, so let's have a look. So, one face looks out from all his canvases. One self-same figure sits or walks or leans. We found her hidden just behind those screens. That mirror gave back all her loveliness. Okay, so this is the first 4 lines, and sonnets often do get divided up into sections like this, so it's quite usual for the first 4 lines to be one section that belongs together, and you can see it's all one long sentence. From the punctuation, there's a full stop here, there's a comma and another comma and a colon there. So this is all one sentence. And also we can look at the rhyme scheme while we're here. So we've got canvases, leans, screens, loveliness. So canvases, loveliness are just about a rhyme. So A and A, and then leans and screens are a different rhyme. So we have B and B there. So you would say it's A, B, B, A is the first group of rhymes. And that rhyming helps to hold those 4 lines together. Okay. So, but let's have a look at what she's actually saying. So there's a face in all of the artist's canvases. So the canvas is the surface that the artist paints on, usually with oil paints if it's a canvas. Okay. So one face, you see the same face, one self-same figure, a face and a figure, the full body sometimes, sits or walks or leans, sort of leaning like this. And it's she's female. We found her hidden just behind those screens. So in the artist's studio, there are probably some screens, and behind the screens, whoever we are, we found these paintings hidden behind the screens. And this figure, the same model, this is a model that the artist has been painting over and over again. We found her hidden, and that mirror gave back. She was reflected in a mirror. It's either a mirror inside the painting itself, or there could have been a mirror in the studio and they saw one of the paintings reflected in the mirror. It's difficult to know where the mirror is. Is it painted in a picture, or was it an actual mirror physically in the studio? That mirror gave back, reflected all her loveliness. So there's this lovely female model who is appearing in so many of this artist's paintings on his canvases. Okay, so it's rather intriguing. So we'll now move on to the next 4 lines. Okay, so now we have the next few lines, and also just to mention that when you have a section of 4 lines like this, it's called a quatrain. Okay, quatrain, which just means 4 lines, really. Quatre in French means 4, so that's what it is, quatrain. So here's the second quatrain, okay? So I'll just read it. So continuing on about the model who appears in the paintings, this is how she appears. A queen in opal or in ruby dress, a nameless girl in freshest summer greens, a saint, an angel. Every canvas means the same one meaning, neither more or less. So this female figure appears, same face every time. Sometimes she's dressed like a queen in different coloured dresses. Sometimes just as a girl in a green dress in the summer. Or she could be a saint or an angel, but it's her every time, same person every time. Every canvas means the same one meaning, neither more or less. It's her each time, okay? So it feels sort of mysterious that these people, we found her hidden. It seems a bit of a mystery. Who is this girl? So, and let's have a look at the rhyme scheme again. So, dress greens means less. So, canvases, loveliness, dress. So that's really the A rhyme again. Dress and less. Okay. And then we have greens and means, leans and screens. So that's the B rhyme again. Okay, so as I said, this rhyme scheme holds those sections together like that. And then so you've got 2 quatrains, and then that adds up to 8, of course, and that's called an octave. So octave. So that's 8. That's in a sonnet, you get really often 8 plus 6. So there are 6 more lines to come. This is a Petrarchan sonnet when it's 8 and 6. Because the poet Petrarch, Italian poet, wrote sonnets with this kind of structure. Shakespeare, when he wrote sonnets, he used a slightly different structure. So they're called Shakespearean sonnets, but this is the Petrarchan structure here. Okay, so we have this mysterious model appearing in lots of different paintings, in different costumes each time, in different colours. A queen, a girl, a saint, an angel. So mysterious. Who is she? So let's see if the next part of the poem answers that question. Okay, so here we have the final 6 lines. And this is called the sestet, okay? Sestet. So we have quatrain, quatrain, and sestet, also octave. So 8 plus 6 gives the full 14 lines of the sonnet. Okay, so let's have a look and see what happens in this final section of the poem. So he, meaning the artist, he feeds upon her face by day and night. So that sounds a bit strange. He feeds upon her face. It sounds a bit unnatural, a bit obsessive perhaps. If he, the artist, is sort of gazing at her face, looking day and night, obsessed with how she looks, perhaps. And she, with true kind eyes, looks back on him. So that sounds a bit more natural. True kind eyes. That looks as if she, as the model, looks back at him as she's modelling for him. True kind eyes. She sounds quite a straightforward person, but whereas he sounds a bit obsessive, perhaps. So she looks back at him, back on him. Fair as the moon and joyful as the light. So she's fair, meaning beautiful, as the moon. Well, the moon is often associated with women. The moon is regarded as female, and the sun is regarded as male in a lot of poetry. So it's appropriate for her to be compared to the moon, because the moon is often thought of as female and related to women. Okay, so she's fair as the moon, and joyful as the light. So she looks happy in the pictures. Not one with waiting, not with sorrow dim. So the poet is saying what she doesn't look like, which is a bit strange. Why would she mention this at all? To be one meaning pale. So again, you'd think the moon is pale compared to the sun. The moon is a lesser light compared to the brightness of the sun. But we've got the moon and the light, but now one meaning pale with waiting. So what would she be waiting for? Not with sorrow dim. Again, dim, meaning not a lot of light. So why would the poet mention this if the model doesn't look like that? It makes you wonder, does the poet know the real woman who did the modelling? Does she know more than you know, more than we can see in the paintings? Does she know the reality of that model and her life? Has she been pale and wan with waiting? And has she been dim with sorrow? Has she been unhappy? This is part of the mystery still. And who would it be? The artist that she's waiting for? What was the relationship between the model and the artist? Interesting. Was she unhappy about something? Okay. Not as she is, but was when hope shone bright. So it's almost as if the poet knows this woman as she is now, and she may be pale with waiting and dim with sorrow now, but at this time, maybe years ago in the paintings, she looks much happier. So what's happened? Something's happened to that woman, that mysterious woman. Because as she is now, she may be pale and sorrowful, not as she is now, but was as she was when hope shone bright. So in the paintings, maybe a few years back, that's when hope shone bright, when she was happy and hopeful, and had a good feeling about the future. Not as she is, that's repeated again, not as she is now, but as she fills his dream. Oh, so this is the final line of the poem. So his dream, that's the artist again. He dreams about her, but is that sort of some imaginative, imaginary? Is that some imaginary woman, and she's not really like that? Is he imagining her in a way that's not really her? He's sort of projecting something onto her. He has a dream and he interprets her in a certain way, perhaps, but not as she is. What's the reality of this woman's life compared with the dream that the artist has about her? It's as if something has gone wrong somewhere, if she's now sorrowful and pale with waiting. So interesting. So it's all very mysterious. But anyway, let's just do the rhyme scheme to see what the structure of this is. So we've got night, hymn, light, dim, bright, dream. So night, that doesn't rhyme with any lines that have gone before. So we'll have to give that C, okay? Night, light, there's another C. Bright, there's another C. And then hymn. Hymn doesn't rhyme with anything that's gone before, so we'll call that D. Hymn and dim. And then dream, it's almost the same. It's not drim, it's dream, but we have M, hymn, dim, dream. So we've got the M, but the vowel sound is slightly different. So it is D, but it's what you would call a half rhyme, because the consonant sound is the same, but the vowel sound is different. Hymn and dim, that's a full rhyme, but dream isn't a full line rhyme because the vowel sound is slightly different. Dream rather than drim. Dream. Which is interesting that, you know, if there is a half rhyme, it usually has a certain effect. And that if the whole poem ends on a half rhyme, it might leave you with a sense of imperfection or a sense of questioning, because it's not a really definite full rhyme. It leaves you feeling, oh dear, okay, as if the poem hasn't been completed fully. There's something still not right, and that's the effect of the poem on the subject of the poem too. You're wondering, who is this woman? And as she is now, how is she now? Is she pale and unhappy and without hope? When she used to have hope, has she lost hope now? And she's in his dream, but what's going on with her actual life? It's very strange. So, I think a little bit of background biographical information just to end with, and for you to perhaps do a bit of research yourself if you want to find out a bit more. But I can tell you, as I said earlier, Christina Rossetti's brother, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was a poet and an artist. It's possible to see a lot of his pictures reproduced on the internet. And we have a link for you where you can see a lot of his paintings. And obviously artists, they need models to be able to paint. So you'll be able to see on that link some of his paintings with female figures in them. And you'll see that there's one particular female model who appears over and over again. And she was called Elizabeth Siddal, and she began as his student. He was teaching her painting because she was quite talented as a painter, and she was having lessons from him. And she did write poetry as well. So she was having lessons in painting from Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and she was painting herself. But then then she was his model too, so she modelled for him. Then they started to have a romantic relationship together, and eventually they got married. Okay. In addition to that, Christina, Dante Gabriel Rossetti's sister, also modelled for him in at least one painting. So you'll be able to see that painting as well on the link. So she herself knows what it's like to model for an artist and to see the end result. So that's two people that we know of who modelled for her brother. The question is, whether this poem is directly about Dante Gabriel Rossetti, or whether maybe he just inspired her, the whole situation with him and Christina and Elizabeth Siddal, artist and two models, just gave her an idea for a poem, and she may have used her imagination for part of it. But it is true that Elizabeth Siddal was unhappy at certain times. The relationship with Dante Gabriel wasn't perfect. So you can find out more about that if you want to Google it. It's quite complicated, but I'll let you do your own research on that to see what you can find out. Okay, so I think I'll just finish by reading the whole poem through so that you can get an overview of it. Okay, so here we go, in an artist's studio. One face looks out from all his canvases. One self-same figure sits or walks or leans. We found her hidden just behind those screens. That mirror gave back all her loveliness. A queen in opal or in ruby dress, a nameless girl in freshest summer greens, a saint, an angel, every canvas means the same one meaning, neither more or less. He feeds upon her face by day and night, and she, with true kind eyes, looks back on him, fair as the moon and joyful as the light, not one with waiting, not with sorrow dim, not as she is, but was when hope shone bright, not as she is, but as she fills his dream. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the poem, and thank you for watching, and see you again soon. Bye for now.